Hello everyone, Sableye here and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be going over my top 5 tips and tricks to help you take your VGC building skills to the next level. Keep in mind we will be directing these tips towards Regulation C as that format is swiftly approaching us, but most of these tips will be able to apply to other formats as well. Just before we get into things today, I would love to hear if you guys have any tips or tricks when it comes to team building. Feel free to leave those in a comment down below, and of course without further ado, let's begin. We're going to start things off super simple on this list. Tip number 1 is going to be take what works. I'm not talking about copying teams verbatim. I'm just simply taking teams that work, cores that work, and keeping them in mind when I'm building for a new format. Or even a midway through a format, right? You don't just immediately throw out all the old toys that have been working when you get one new one, right? Or 2 new ones, right? You want to keep things going and you want to build on what you've already had success on. Right, so currently in front of us we have the Vancouver regional standings just as an example. You could do this with any tournament, any team, realistically anything here. And just looking at Abdullah's team, it's like you want to look at it and go, okay, what works here and what may not work so well in the next format, right? Looking at it immediately, Lilligant Torkoal, generally speaking, is a solid core. Torkoal works because it gives the photosynthesis boost to the Great Tusk and the Fluttermane. And then Lilligant beside the Torkoal gives you that fast option for eruptions, and it also gives you fast sleep powders to get you out of potentially nasty situations that you don't want to be in. And overall, that's kind of how you want to adapt to this. And you're like, okay, this is what works. This is why the core works, for example. I did that very quickly. Probably could have gone so much more in depth there, but for the sake of the video, I went nice and quick. And then you go, okay, with the new format, what isn't so hot on this team anymore? What isn't so great on this team anymore? Right? And you answer it that way. What I would personally do is maybe look at it and say, hey, let's just drop King Gambit, right? King Gambit's solid, but I think with the new format, I can kind of commit to the aggressiveness, right? I'll drop King Gambit, I'll add like a Shen Pao, so to speak, right? And that's still going to give my Great Tusk, and it's also going to give my Dragonite a boost because of the defense drop from Shen Pao. And just overall, like, Shen Pao Dragonite, way back when, has always been a core, right? Shen Pao Dragonite is solid, right? And now you're adding it to another solid core. Hey, it might not work, but if it doesn't work, you strip it back down and you go, okay, why didn't it work? Well, let's look back at this. Why did Abdullah's team work in the first place? Now, you can do this with my team as well here in second place, and I just made a whole video on changing this team into Regulation C, so if you're looking for that, it will be in the description down below. But basically, so to speak, it's like I dropped King Gambit immediately, and then I put on a Ting Lu. I'm like, I didn't like that. It took away most of my damage dealers because I took away what worked from the team. What worked from the team was Fluttermane and Iron Bundle being damage dealers. By adding Ting Lu on the team, it didn't work at all, right? And that was that's an example of when you just forget what works or forget why a team works. So what I did was I added King Gambit back. I ended up dropping Corviknight, I added a Wo-Chien. And it made the team work a lot better because it made Fluttermane almost unkillable with the Intimidates, with the Wo-Chien attack drop, right? So it's keep in mind what works when you're taking the team. And don't forget about them when you have a new format to play with. That is tip number 1. Tip number 2. Testing is greater than fine-tuning. Now, I say this very loosely because I am a firm believer in fine-tuning later on in formats, later on in teams. However, when you're first building your team and you're first throwing that team in the builder, right, it's super easy to get caught up in building the perfect spread, right? And I find myself doing this from time to time. It's because I'm a spread guy. I like looking at EVs and just making them nice and perfect, making them nice and pretty, right? But testing is far greater than that, especially when it's a new format, especially when you're putting a new team of 6 together, just trying things out. Because I could sit here and spend 3 hours going, ooh, if I go 164 over here, the Fluttermane is still a 50-50, and I could try and sit here for 6 hours and try to fine-tune this EV spread, right? But that's 6 hours that I could potentially be wasting if I go into a builder, if I go into a few games after that and the team just doesn't work. Well, I just wasted 6 hours on a Ting Lu spread that really is now useless, right? So what you want to do is you want to start basic. You can hit a few certain things, like I want my Ting Lu, I want it to hit 71 because that's probably going to outpace no investment King Gambits. It's a completely random thing. I would never recommend that, but it's just a random thought process, right? Just to show you that, like, you want to find something that you want to hit. And then, okay, I'm just going to dump it because I want this thing to hit super hard. And then I'm just going to dump the rest into into something like this, right? These aren't even numbers, but we'll pretend they are. Yeah, that's better. Okay, right? And then I'll just dump the rest and I'll use that because now I've spent 3 minutes on a Ting Lu spread. I don't think it's a very good one, but like just for an example, right? You throw that in, right? And then you can play actual games. And then you go, okay, the team is working or the team is not working. Now, if the team is working, it's like, okay, can I make this better? Ooh, Ting Lu didn't live that hit. I think it's better off if I try to survive this now, right? Like, I don't want to be taking 63. So then you can come in and fine tune afterwards. But basically, generally speaking, when you first build the team, it's better to go basic. I would even say you can get away with just 252, 252, 4. When you build the team, see how the team functions. And then as you play, you get the experience and you're going, I probably need to live this hit. Or I probably need to make sure I'm getting this knockout, right? And you can adapt the team that way. That is why testing is greater than fine-tuning at the beginning, in my opinion. This takes us to tip number 3, the physical special defensive split / synergy. I don't know what I'm going to call it yet, but the proper name will be on the screen. But basically what I'm looking at here, and I'm looking at keeping in mind the ruin abilities on this team. In any other format, I probably would have said I don't really care about my physical special split because I think it's overhyped. I think if you sometimes have 5 physical attackers and 1 special attacker, it's fine. I'm not concerned about it. But in this format, it's definitely something for sure to keep in the back of your mind. Now, what I want to consider here is look at this garbage team that I put on my screen. It's probably not going to be very good. I threw it on there in 5 minutes. And I just wanted to showcase something. And what I'm trying to showcase here is why I think it's important now to consider physical special split, right? I like Ting Lu, I like Fluttermane, I like Bundle, and I love Glamora in this format. Even Chi-Yu is pretty good, right? However, Ting Lu is probably going to be sitting on the field for a long time, just given the nature of Ting Lu, right? And with Fluttermane, Iron Bundle, and Glamora, these are all special attackers. The chances that I'm going to have one of these 3, even Chi-Yu, on the field next to Ting Lu is probably high, if not super, super common. Right? And because of that, I have to keep in mind now that, oh, well, I'm all of a sudden with all of my special attackers am doing so much less. And it's fine to have a few. Like if I want Flutter Bundle Ting Lu, that's fine. Maybe I switch it up. Maybe I go something like Arcanine. Maybe I bring in something like a Palafin instead of a Chi-Yu just to have the damage, right? And all of a sudden now I can have Ting Lu on the field, but I have attackers that aren't going to be mitigated. And this works the other way as well. Even if I say I don't have a Ruin Mon, and I have, let's just say, 6 special attackers, Iron Moth there, let's see, just Abomasnow, we'll call it a special attacker, sure, why not, and we'll call it, let's say, I don't know, Volcarona. This is, once again, a bad team, but now I have 6 special attackers. If I run into a Chi-Yu, sorry, not a Chi-Yu, if I run into a Ting Lu, what am I going to do? And normally before, it's like, oh, if they have Snarl, you can kind of be faster than Snarl, or if I was all physical attackers and they had Intimidate, the Intimidate can only be on the field so often, right? If they want to reset the Intimidate beforehand, they got to switch it out, reset it back in, right? And that gives you leverage, opportunities to get through that. But something like Wo-Chen and Ting Lu sit on the field in front of this, and they don't need to switch out to reset that. The ability is permanent. It's on the field, right? Ting Lu is going to sit in front of this team and eat it for breakfast, right? Which is the only reason I'm recommending physical special defensive split. Once again, you want to keep in mind defensive pivots as well. This is why I say defensive split, because you don't want to also sit on the field doing no damage, because Ting Lu and Wo-Chen are great. They're great damage mitigators. But if I end up with a team of Ting Lu, Wo-Chen, and just 6 things that just aren't doing damage, eventually they're going to break through it, right? So it's keeping that stuff in mind, and it's not falling victim to, oh my goodness, this is perfect because Ting Lu is going to save this, but Ting Lu is going to save me, keep me alive a little longer, but oh my goodness, now I'm doing no damage back. Or Ting Lu is going to keep me alive so much longer that I can't do damage even though I'm trying to do damage, right? You can say the same thing with Chien-Pao. Maybe we're all weak physically, right? And they come in with Chien-Pao and they're like, "Oh, I'm just going to click E-Speed and with Dragonite and my Chien-Pao, right? It's going to steamroll you, right?" So I definitely think it's super important to keep the balance in mind of things. I wouldn't say like it's the end all be all. If you want to have 5 physical attackers and a Chien-Pao, hey, that could actually work, right? Once again, these are mere suggestions, something to keep in mind that could come into handy if you find yourself falling into this trap. And I found myself at the beginning of the format with Ting Lu, with Wo-Chen sitting on the field, not really doing damage, I wasn't taking any damage, but I wasn't really doing anything, right? I wasn't being proactive with my gameplay. That was just an example there. Just something to do. Once again, really bad team on the screen, but like the concept still applies, right? You don't want to be in a spot where you just simply can't do damage because your own team building is detrimental to you. Tip number 4. Don't be afraid to try new things. And I'm not talking, keep in mind guys, I'm not sitting here saying, oh my goodness, Ryan said we can run Togepi. He wants us to run Togepi. Or Togepi's not even in the dex, but you know what I mean, right? He wants us to run Litten. It's also not in the dex, but he wants us to run Litleo. That's for some reason the Pokemon, right? This ain't what I'm saying. Don't get me wrong. Don't run Litleo unless you think it serves like a specific niche. But something along the lines of like, even a Raichu I think could be underexplored. Something like Gyarados I think right now is a really cool meta pick, right? And it hasn't really been used too much in Series 1 and Series 2, right? Obviously these are just 2 random examples. You can kind of cater them to what your favorite Pokemon is perhaps, or anything along those lines. And I'm saying this because a lot of the times in team building, people will be like, oh, I have a Ting Lu, I have a Fluttermane, I have an Arcanine, and then they'll just kind of go along the lines and just be like, oh, this is my team, it's a standard 6, I don't really have room to waver, right? But like, there's something to be said about creative team building, right? And trying something like Gyarados is never a bad thing, because at some point something has to be tried. Like take example, San Diego Regionals. I think like back in Series 1, nobody was really running Tauros. Not only did Water Tauros win the event, I think there were 12 Water Tauros in top 32. Like no one had seen it before. And it just like, it wasn't a meta Pokemon, but people weren't afraid to try something that they thought was good and they made it work, right? Now, once again, I'm not saying go crazy with Litleo or anything like that, but you can try other things like maybe this Gyarados, maybe something like a Raichu. And something that I think is slept on when you're trying new things or trying these niche Pokemon is the core you have to build around these niche Pokemon to work. Actually, let's say Ampharos, right? No one really runs Ampharos, right? I think that's completely niche, right? Okay, so Ampharos is weak to thing. I don't know. Well, I'm not going to sit here team building, right? That's not the point of the video. But like the core that I might end up building around Ampharos is going to need to be a very solid core to make Ampharos work, right? So maybe I'll end up with like an Amoonguss Arcanine Fluttermane, which already is a super strong core, right? And then I'll get experience using Amoonguss Arcanine Fluttermane while I'm trying to make Ampharos work. Hey, at the end of the day, Ampharos may not have worked, but I just dropped the Ampharos and all of a sudden I have a super strong core, figure out what Ampharos wasn't doing, put something in there that is working. Now all of a sudden I have my strong core, I patch that strong core, and I've got a really solid team. Sucks that I don't get to use Ampharos, but at the same time, it wasn't for nothing, right? So I'm not saying don't try new things. I think trying new things is super valuable. But once again, just be realistic. Make sure it is actually working, and it's not like, oh, it's like my favorite Pokemon bias sort of thing. And here we are, tip number 5. And tip number 5 is a very simple one, but I think it takes the right mindset to really get into. And tip number 5 is going to be adjustments. And a lot of people, and I know I've fallen into this trap, and I'm sure 90% of team builders or anybody trying to team build in VGC has fallen into this trap as well, of looking at a team, going, hey, this team is really, really bad. I played like 4 games with it. It wasn't working, you know, and okay, it's gone. Bye. I don't need it anymore. It's gone, right? Well, I don't think that's a very good strategy. What I want to say here, and my tip and trick here is, yeah, it might be a bad team, and hey, yeah, you might delete it, right? Because like sometimes you just build a team, and like in a few games, you're like, yeah, this thing is garbage. But I think it's super important to look at why the team doesn't work, and I think that's something people forget about often, right? It's like, okay, why isn't this team working, right? Because then when I look at it, I'm like, this team wasn't working because I simply wasn't doing damage, right? Like, yeah, I had Perish Song. But the moment they could switch out of the Perish Song, it's like, oh, well, now I'm doing no damage. Like, Dragonite Palafin aren't enough on their own. They're both losing to Iron Bundle. That's actually how I lost. This is, by the way, the team I got top 4 with at my local last weekend, which was testing Regulation C. And I've already hated it. I've already scrapped it, right? But it wasn't working because Palafin Dragonite, I lost to Iron Bundle twice. I lost to Iron Bundle Fluttermane. I couldn't Perish the Fluttermane because they would switch out of it, and my Perish was less effective, and I couldn't bring Palafin or Dragonite because there was an Iron Bundle, right? So I had to really try to maneuver my way around like that. So it's looking at why the team doesn't work. Yeah, I scrapped it, right? Like, yeah, I'm never probably playing these 6 again, right? And I completely scrapped it. But I realized why the team doesn't work. And I touched upon it earlier where I had Wo Chen and Ting Lu on the field and I just wasn't doing damage. The problem is it's okay if I can click Perish Song. But the moment the Perish Song falls through, it doesn't really work, right? And that's where making the adjustment is smart, right? You can say, okay, maybe Perish Song isn't the mode. Maybe I need more damage than Gothitelle Wo Chen, right? Maybe I just do something like this, right? All of a sudden, now I can have 2 more slots to deal with bundle, maybe put on some more pressure, right? It's how you go about making these adjustments and realizing why something doesn't work. Hey, like I could have scrapped it, right? I could have easily done what I just said at the beginning of tip 5 and just said, hey, all right, bye, on to the next team. But I wouldn't have learned anything from that, right? What I've learned is that like you need to find that right balance with this team in this format, right? It was a very early format team. Obviously, the format hasn't even officially started yet, right? So super early format team, and it was able to teach me that, hey, I need to make sure that as cool as Wo Chen and Ting Lu are, and I'm not taking any damage, I need to make sure that I can still do damage, right? So finding things that allow you to pick up on certain things of a format is never a bad thing, right? Even if I play 2 games with a team and trash it, that's perfectly fine. That's okay. But you have to realize why the team doesn't work. You can't just say, oh, the team doesn't work, on to the next. You know, it doesn't, as cool as that is, as fun as it is, easy as it is to do that. Yep, team didn't work, next, right? You, by sitting down and taking an extra 3, maybe 4 minutes to figure out why the team didn't function the way you wanted it to function, because obviously you built it for a reason, right? And by taking that extra 3 minutes to figure out why the team didn't function will help you immensely moving forward in future team building endeavors. Hey, it might not help that specific team, but it will most certainly help your future teams, keeping those errors and not allowing you to not make those same mistakes, right? History repeats itself, but if you learn from the history, it's not going to repeat itself. And that's kind of what I'm getting at in this scenario. So with that, that's going to be it from me, from the tips and the tricks of team building. Hopefully you find yourself using some of these. Hopefully you find yourself seeing new heights in your team building endeavors, as well as getting to that higher point on the ladder, higher points in tournaments. All in all, anything, hopefully you achieve your goals in VGC. I could go on for 6 years with this outro, but I'm not. I'm going to stop rambling now. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will catch you all in a future video.